Welcome to our podcast launch. I'd like to think of it as a forum where we can explore the intersection between technology and our quest to a sustainable future. I'm Habiba Sarhan. I'm a PhD candidate at the Political Data Science chair, and I'm really passionate about responsible AI, especially the principal inclusion. Today we have a lineup of thinkers and doers. And they are all sharing one vision, which is basically how to harness those technological advancements to push forward and drive the Sustainable Development Goals. So within this podcast and throughout the podcasts that we've already filmed, we want to tackle the big questions. For instance, how can we make sure that technology benefits and actually reaches everyone, everywhere? We tackle the complex relationship between technology, the advancement and innovation, and the Sustainable Development Goals. But we also reflect on instances where technology could derail our progress. We also celebrate success stories where it has propelled us forward. And now, without further ado, I'd like to start the conversation that matters to our planet and its people. I want to give the floor to Helena, and could you introduce yourself, and then Alina, and then Johannes.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much for inviting me here. This is actually the first podcast of my life, so let's see how that goes. My name is Helene von Schwichow. I'm a PhD candidate and project manager here at the Professorship for Policy Analysis at TUM, and I am working on two projects. One is called Digitainability and the other one Sustainability, and you can probably guess that I am particularly interested in this intersection of tech and sustainability goals. In my research, I am particularly focusing on the digital sustainability transformation on the city level. Very happy to be here tonight.
Thank you, Habiba. This introduction you just gave, it's inspiring and also a bit humbling, because it again emphasizes the scale of what we're tackling, right? My name is Alina Kokarina. I studied at the Technical University of Munich, pharmaceutical engineering, and I had and still have a big passion for like medical technology, for everything that tackles health and well-being. But I've mostly focused on software engineering projects, and I'm currently working as a technical consultant for purpose-driven teams to really drive innovation that fosters progress. I've since branched out into different industries, and it's really great to see what drive there is within all types of industries to really drive benefits for society for the future. And I'm looking forward to explore this across different industries.
Johannes, you have the floor and you're muted.
Hi everyone, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Perfect. So I don't normally wear a tie, but today I'm in Paris at the OECD AI Governance Forum, hence the outfit. My name is Johannes Klimberger. I work at the OECD as an AI policy advisor, and we focus on the topic of AI and sustainability, and a bit broader on the green digital twin transition. So how the kind of twin transition of the green transformation and the digital transformation, where they intersect, how they can reinforce each other, and how we can possibly align them, because they don't necessarily align. It's imperative that especially these kind of two big transformation of the current century are going the same direction, or the digital transformation is enforcing sustainable development, the ecological transition. That's kind of the broad framing, and then very specifically, we look at artificial intelligence, how it can have beneficial applications for social sustainability, ecological sustainability, but also how to mitigate the negative effects of AI and technology on the environment, on the SDGs. So yeah, we try to get as a very holistic view at the OECD. That's kind of a high level view on the topic. But and that's why it's great. And I know Helene from the sustainability course, that different people at different levels in academia and civil society, in industry, look at this topic from their respective viewpoint, because you need all these perspectives, and it's great that we have so many perspectives here today.
Thank you, Hannes, for joining. Thank you, Helena, and thank you, Alina. And I think this is actually my thought as well, Johannes. And because we have different representation, like from academia, from the industry, and from an international organization, I'd like to start with the question that would tackle basically each sector. And I want to know how each sector uniquely contributes actually to advancing the Sustainable Development Goals through technological innovation. And I think Alina can start.
All right. Yeah, it's a big question. So as you just summarized, I'm kind of the one who's worked mostly in the industry. So I'll start with my own perspective. And I think that in the industry across different areas, of course, innovation is very market driven, right? But at the same time, you can use this understanding of not just consumer needs, but also societal needs to really drive innovation forward. And there's a lot of companies that attract great talent, and with that can also gain a lot of traction, a lot of speed in terms of the innovation, and can really use the know-how that they have internally. However, of course, we can see that there's often a conflict of interest between like commercial use of innovation and also thinking in silos. So you just think about your own industry and the thing that you're currently tackling, and maybe not of the wider implications that it has. And I think we've seen a lot of negative effects of that type of thinking in especially big tech innovations. And one thing that also ties into this availability of know-how and really driven people is something that we can really see across all sectors. It's everyone who is involved and gets the chance to really shape innovation that is somehow tied in with the SDGs. Those people are really driven. They have a lot of engagements. HR departments report that they get more referrals, more applications for everything that is kind of purpose-driven, that touches sustainability, that touches sustainable development goals. I guess this is something that we have in all sectors, and I'd like to hear what the others have to say about that.
So what about academia?
Yeah, I also think that it's a very big question since so many academics around the world are working on or trying to tackle this from different perspectives. But generally speaking, I see the strength of academia in critically evaluating which technologies actually contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals and which innovations might rather be counterproductive or just sound fancy. Or come with major trade-offs when we look at the SDGs. So this, I would say, this perspective of critically evaluating what is going on in the industry, I would say is the most interesting part. And then I think there's also this big strength of academia in educating people about the current discourses going on around technology from a sustainability perspective. And I mean, I think I don't want to say that single individuals or even students should be responsible now for the sustainability transformation. But I think, it's a very valuable room for discussion.
So I'd say we, at the OECD in particular, but in many international organizations, we are in a kind of translation role between what we get from academia, from the scientists, from the technologists, from industry. So it's very much, I know it's a like phrase that's being thrown around a lot, but it's really a multi-stakeholder approach. So we get a lot of input from the different stakeholder groups, and then our job is to translate it into policy and to translate it to for policymakers, which can be a quite tricky subject because policymakers obviously have to look at a lot of different aspects at the same time. If you're doing digital policy, then digital policy has so many different aspects, and sustainability or sustainable development is only one aspect that people need to kind of grapple with. So yeah, that's I would say is our main function, is to make it understandable for politicians, policymakers, what are the key challenges, what purpose should innovation have, because innovation is not a you don't innovate for innovation's sake, but you innovate for, hopefully, not only for increasing advertising revenue or advancing certain industry aspect, but ideally you innovate for certain aspects of the sustainable development goals, for the ecological transition, for social causes, for decreasing inequality, for a variety of causes. And kind of our goal is to help policy drive innovation in the right direction.
Thank you. Yes, of course.
May I add something? I think the question here is, of course, we're all looking at this from our unique perspectives, right? From where we have the most experience as individuals. But already the way we phrased the question, the way we answered it, shows that I don't think there's enough dialogue between those three sectors, right? Johannes just really focused on fostering dialogue between different parties, but also I think there's always an opportunity to have more dialogue also between industries, academia, and as Johannes mentioned, NGOs. So that's also one of the main drivers that brought me to RTH.
I think the majority here, and I'm really happy that you pointed this out, and not just for me. It's not just about an international organization or someone from the industry and someone from academia, but it's also how to hear and listen to the voices on the other side of the world. So it's not just the Western world we're talking about. We're talking about the global North versus the global, not versus, but as well as the global South. And for me, this is kind of, paved the path to my second question, which is about inclusion. And I want to ask you, what inclusive strategies can we adopt to ensure equitable access to, those innovations and advancements across various geographies and social stratas? So I think let's give the mic to Johannes first.
That's a bit of an awkward position because the OECD is kind of an embodiment of a global North organization. I think that's like the traditional Western. I think The Economist usually refers to it as the club of rich countries, which is not a wrong characterization. Now, the obvious answer from an international organization would be cooperation, knowledge sharing, best practice. I think it's crucial for us that we are not just talking within our, because I note from the AI governance space that conversation happens in a US, Europe centric, like 90% of people come from that kind of sphere. I would say there's like people recognize that it's a problem, but it's an ongoing discussion how to include more of a global South in conversation. I think one thing I would like to highlight, because that's from my work, and I don't have a solution for how to include them in these kind of global governance frameworks more. But what we found when we look at AI and AI innovation, especially in the past year with the large language models, is that the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure that you need for developing these kind of cutting edge technologies, this infrastructure is not equally divided. There's a huge divide between industry and academia. Like the very, very large compute resource that you need for advanced AI models that sits within a handful of global tech companies that even MIT and Harvard and some other universities don't have access to. And of course, that's even worse when you look into the global south. So I would say one aspect, and that's really only one aspect, but access to digital infrastructure is key for getting, like, for sharing knowledge and for having people even having the opportunity to develop and apply advanced technologies. But of course, the problem is much bigger than that, and we kind of see it daily in almost every governance discussion that is hugely misrepresented in a way.
Thank you, Hannes. Let's move over to academia.
Okay, yeah, maybe I have two thoughts to add. So first of all, yeah, free and open source software can be a strategy. For, yeah, I don't know, for example, imagine a civil society project on a community level who want to, I don't know, do any sustainability project together, give them some, I don't know, technology infrastructure or tools that they can use without necessarily having to pay with either money or their data. So I think this is one strategy for more accessibility that then can also lead to inclusion. And the other thought, I think this is a discussion that has been going on for a long time now, but try to diversify the teams in tech development, because most of the technologies that we are using still all the time have been developed in Silicon Valley by mostly healthy white young to middle-aged men, and this is the way they work, and this is also the group of users those technologies work for. And so I am quite positive that more diverse teams that bring different cultural perspectives, but also, I don't know, perspectives from people with disabilities or marginalized groups into the process of tech development would also lead to better technology in the long run.
Thank you. I think the intersectionality between being a woman and living in the global south is very different than also being a woman and living in a Western country. And we talked about this in one of the podcasts, so this is a little bit of marketing in 100 Voices. I think your project is actually does a great job in capturing what we're talking about when we talk about inclusion, about equity, equality, and the Sustainable Development Goals, and how we can achieve those through technological advancements. So stay tuned. So industry.
Industry, yeah, I think I can jump on the same train of thought that you just mentioned. So definitely diversity is a big thing. I think you just already mentioned quite a few problems that we can see in the industry. And also the question was about leading, right? We were thinking about inclusive strategies. So how can we really get everyone involved? I have to mention that I'm currently very lucky to be working with very diverse teams, really, with both men and women from all over the world, with different backgrounds, and that's a really great vibe to see. However, I'm still based in Germany and mostly working with clients from Europe and the US. So even, of course, always try to get in people with different backgrounds who have experience of living also in other countries. But even if you're working in a team, it's just so important to create awareness of the privilege that we have while we're working here and while we're tackling different problems, and to also try and take the time and effort to think beyond the obvious. And I think here we can also, or we must take a look also in academia and what is being researched, because when we think about how technology makes a lot of things more accessible because you can just read things on your phone, and we tend to forget that apart from the infrastructure, there's also people who may not be able to read or may be able to access the infrastructure, but may not be able to pay for it, or have to deprioritize it due to their other costs in their life. So if you create this awareness and maybe try to integrate this in your innovation framework, in whatever you're using to really create new technologies, that already helps. And if you have this awareness, you also know that you'll have to get insights from outside of your own bubble. And this is something that I can see it happening sometimes. But I can also see that often the awareness of what is outside of my own bubble is not there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's good that we have diverse teams. This is a starter. And because you mentioned frameworks, let's have a step backwards and maybe think of, or let me ask you, what ethical frameworks or principles do you believe are essential to adhere to when developing and actually implementing technology in pursuit of the Sustainable Development Goals? And I think you're smiling because this is your area of expertise.
No, maybe not more than anyone else here, but I think it's very simple. But yeah, first ethical principle would be to respect basic human rights and planetary boundaries in the development and also deployment of technology, which is not something we're seeing at the moment. As long, I don't know, as we have child labor and yeah, the exploitation of limited resources in the production of smartphones, or very precarious working conditions in the field of data work. There has, yeah, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago or something, there has been this story about the data workers in Kenya who were training ChatGPT to be less racist, for example, for, I don't know, less than $2 an hour. So I think the answer is very simple. Basic human rights and planetary boundaries should be respected in the development, but also over the whole life cycle of each technology.
I mean, it could be simple and obvious, but you don't see it, so
it's very difficult.
It's here. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And what do you think?
I think on a high level, it's hard to disagree, right? I think on a high level, whoever you ask, the answer can always be it's simple. However, so I'm not an ethicist. I work in practical software engineering processes. So I'm trying to see the more practical way of things. And I also see that a lot of people, they start to, I wouldn't say mental distance themselves from discussions when they become too abstract, too high level. But I can see that sometimes people say, well, it's an important discussion, but maybe it doesn't have so many things to do with what I'm actually doing. So what I definitely like to see is for the individuals involved in the actual innovation process and the creation of new technologies, for them to also connect these ethical frameworks that are being used to their own values, and a bit of awareness on how what I as an individual want to see in my environment, or when I interact with other people, how I can also use this to work towards a greater goal.
I have a question. So Microsoft, we had the responsible AI standard. So it was a specific standard that every AI product had to go through. I'm wondering if within the industry there is a specific standard or framework while you're working on developing something or designing something that you have to adhere to, or is it joy?
That's actually a point that I also wanted to make. It's currently we're seeing a lot of people, teams, groups, and companies who are seeing that there is an issue, that are trying to tackle it. But we can't have every company creating their own AI principles. Or we can have, and this is what we currently have. But one thing I'd definitely like to see in the near future is panels across different industries really coming together and saying, okay, is there any underlying framework or principle that we're all working towards, or are there at least things that we can agree upon that must absolutely not happen? That might be easier sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a status quo that I'd love to see challenged.
And we have to raise awareness. This is where we start, right? Johannes, what about the OECD?
So I would go in a similar direction. I would even say it's not really a question about which principles, because there's a bunch of principles. The OECD has AI principles. There are the UNESCO principles on ethical AI. Microsoft has principles. Google has principles. I think Bavaria is developing AI principles. Feels like my local bakery is going to have AI principles next week. I don't think it's a question of having principles or agreeing on kind of it's always the same. It's trustworthy, transparent, fair, equitable, sustainable. The question is really when it comes to applying these principles, and not just in your average everyday product, but when it came to, so as an example, when the large AI models, when ChatGPT came to the market, then suddenly all of these principles that were announced before were not as important anymore, because suddenly you're in a competitive business environment where you need to kind of beat your competitor. And then suddenly, of course, you have these principles, but they're not really worth a lot if the moment when it gets tough, like when it comes to applying them, and there's a lot of, and the incentives are not aligned, then the first thing that counts once again is the economic principle, and all other great ethical principles are kind of on the side. So I think it's not an issue of having them or of announcing them to the world. It's really about applying them in a constant manner, and applying them also like in many ways they run counter to many of the principles of big technology companies. So that's where the real work in principle application lies, not in writing them down.
Thank you for your honesty, honestly. I think this is something that we all thought about and that is bothering a lot of people, I guess. But we're not doing anything about it. We don't want to do anything about it. We don't have the power. It's yeah.
I guess across all sectors, it comes down to leadership, right? If leadership presents us whether it's an industry or any other situation, that the values or the ethical principles are more than just some text written down on paper that we may or may not want to adhere to, then this transfers throughout all of the organization, and well, we'll see how that goes.
And okay. So just to add one thing, not to say that these principles don't have any value, to the contrary, it's really important that very smart people took a lot of time and work to come up with these principles. They are very valuable to have, but you also need the application side, because otherwise, and you get a lot of people when you have these principles but you don't adhere to them, then it's very counterproductive. Then you shouldn't have put them in the first place, because then people try to hold you accountable for it. But when they see that these things don't matter in the real world, then then you do a lot of damage to trust in technology as well.
I think you all pointed out the gap that we need to bridge between people who actually do those standards and come up with the principles, and the technology side, and also working interdisciplinary and not just in our islands. So technology is a two-edged sword. This is, we read this in every article, literally. And I have two questions that are related to that. So basically, can technology ever set back a specific sustainable development goal or the progress of a specific goal? And how can we avoid that? And of course, the positive side of the sword, which is, can you share a success story where technology helped actually reach one of the goals? Do you want to start?
I can start, yeah. So yeah, as you've said, maybe I'll start with the first question. it was phrased as a yes or no, right? So I think the answer is, from my perspective, definitely yes. I can think of a situation where technology has been counterproductive, and yeah, multiple ones. So you mentioned like two-edged sword, probably more than two edges, right? There's also different facets, but everything that can be used to share knowledge can be used to also share disinformation. And everything where you can connect and engage with people, you can also use this to spread hate speech. Just, was it last week we had a talk at RTH about addiction to social media? So it can again connect you, but you can also get addicted to the process, to using your smartphone. And even in terms of a more political view, everything you can start to do to expose a corrupt government, you can also use the same technology to start a riot. And just in general, we try, or I think we tend to not think about the implications technology has on energy consumption, especially looking at the newest AI models. And of course, things happen, and then we start to look at how we can make them more efficient. But this is definitely having a lot of implications on our carbon footprint and sustainability in itself. I could keep going and also switch to the positive sides, but maybe
Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, so if we're looking at the, I've already mentioned a few positive points, right? And that really especially like to point out how technology can be used to get access to information, and how it's been able to kind of democratize education. So you can really, if you strive to, you can gain university level knowledge about any topic. You might not get the degree, although there's also a lot of ways to get access to even qualifications online. And I really love seeing that. And also access to education is like one of the SDGs that I really love to see progressing. And well, with my personal background, I also love seeing any type of innovation that is happening in the medical field. So one example would be, and this again tied into access to information, right? Any type of access to medical expertise, especially in rural environments, especially in countries where access to healthcare is not as easy as it is in for example, Germany. So these are two fields that I really love to see the progress there, and I'm hoping to see more in the next few years.
Yes, since I am especially interested in the social dimension of sustainability, I first had to think of the SDG 10, so to reduce inequalities. And there have been so many attempts to use algorithmic decision-making systems in order to increase fairness. For example, in court, when it comes to credit scores, or who gets access to certain social services. And there are so many cases in which the algorithm very quickly learned to reproduce stereotypes, and to discriminate marginalized groups, and to actually increase the problem that was already there, and not to foster or reduce foster equity or reduce inequalities at all. And then, as you have mentioned, also the cost that comes with the CO2 emissions on the ecological level is very big, and is getting bigger and bigger with the models getting bigger and bigger, and also being used a lot more. I know that Johannes can talk a lot more about that, so I will leave it to him. And then I also thought of some success stories that I know. And of course, there's not the one-size-fits-all solution, this one technology that will actually lead us to this goal. But I think there are some interesting fields in the field of catastrophe management. So, for example, there is this startup here in Munich that use satellite data to detect wildfires. And then also in my seminar, I had a group of students who were working on an AI system to also use satellite data in order to detect garbage in the ocean. So I think there are some very interesting ideas in that direction. And then personally, I also always like the more low-tech solutions that somehow lead to, for example, more social equity. There's, for example, this website called wheelmap.org that actually where anybody can just mark places that are accessible for wheelchairs. So kind of works like Wikipedia. Everyone can contribute. It's open, and I think it's actually a big step for people who are in wheelchairs just to know which restaurants they can go to, for example, if they go to another city. And since you talked about health before, there's also this example from Taiwan that I like very much from the pandemic. So in the beginning of the pandemic, there was suddenly a shortage of masks in Taiwan, and then a group of people from the local hacking community, together also with the digital minister, just teamed up to also create a map that would have like real life data and show which pharmacies still have masks, masks in the city, and that worked actually quite well. So I think the most promising solutions are often not the most high-tech solutions in the field of SDG, working towards SDGs, but also those who include the community and are participatory in a way.
Thank you. Johannes.
Yeah, I mean, on both sides, there are like hundreds and thousands of examples on technology and AI specifically. As Helene said, one big application area is prediction and modeling. That's huge for a variety of sustainable development goals, because it helps you with helps with disaster prediction, mitigating disasters before they happen, and then once they happen, kind of coordinating the help. Like that's a huge application area. Then another great area is making existing systems more efficient, like that can be done across the board, and that's one of the most common application areas of AI at the moment. And then what has a lot of potential is the third area, which is using technology for advancing science in other fields. So there's a whole field for AI for drug discovery, which has huge effects and which accelerates the process sometimes by years. You can use AI for advanced material science. Like there's so many scientific disciplines that can benefit from applying technology. That's not AI specific, but it can just accelerate other fields of scientific discovery. But then, of course, you have the big downside. Helene mentioned that already. The models themselves come with a huge carbon and water and material footprint. The entire digital infrastructure, like more than AI. But if data centers were a country, they would rank among the top 20 countries in the world in terms of energy consumption. And some countries, they are, I think in Ireland, they're up to 20% of the entire electricity consumption of the country. So the infrastructure itself has a big footprint. But then maybe even more concerning is using technology for activities that run counter to sustainable development. One obvious example is the oil giants using AI for oil field discovery, anything that runs counter to decreasing consumption, but that's kind of accelerating consumption. And there's a lot of examples that you can think of that kind of have that in mind. So when you're weighing the pros and cons of technology for sustainable development, I would say you need to go to the core of the business model of a company. It's not about adding a fancy, cool application that does something nice on top of your business model that's unsustainable, but it's about thinking very deeply about, I think the Professor Wurster from the sustainable course would call it like the different depth of sustainability. Weak and strong sustainability. We're very good at having weak sustainability, at using technology for some efficiency gains, but not very good at achieving deep sustainability transformation.
Thank you, Johannes. Thank you. I think we've reached the question where I know for a fact that a lot of people from the audience are really, really excited about, which is the advice question. What essential advice would you give to someone launching, a startup aimed at the Sustainable Development Goals?
All right. I think I can wrap this up back to the first comment or your introduction. So it's a huge scale of things that we'd like to tackle. And first of all is don't let this discourage you, let it inspire you, let it drive you to really start with small changes and work towards bigger ones. And I think this is an advice that's been given to writers, to creators, to startup founders. It's that you don't have to tackle the whole problem. You don't have to look at things at a global and very abstract scale, but rather look at what things look like in people's everyday lives and how you can change things on a small scale. And then try to extend your circle of influence further and further. I think especially for founders, for entrepreneurs, for people looking for money, it's important to have like this purpose, this drive to change something on a global scale, but also to have a very specific problem that you can not just solve, but also understand intimately, and really ideally something where you could put yourself in the shoes of someone that's going to be impacted of this, or where you can gather the people who can really give you deep knowledge of how the problem looks like for individuals, for small communities, and work from there. That's something, even if you want to tackle something on a bigger scale, it's a great start for gathering empathy and for gaining understanding of what the actual problem and what its implications are.
Yeah, I can absolutely agree to that, and maybe just to add a few more thoughts. Be aware of quick tech fixes. So what might look like a good and easy tech solution to a problem might actually cause harm to another sustainability goal, or another sustainability level, however you want to call it, or might be harmful to people in other contexts, or something like that. So always try to focus on a small problem, but see the bigger picture. I know that's easier said than done. And also, going back to the question about the global South and the global North, always consider the geographic and also the cultural context your solution is developed, but also, of course, deployed in. Then my second idea was to make sure your organization itself is a good example. So I don't know, promote fair working conditions, maybe use recycled technologies or recycled materials, and take care of gender equity in your organization. So I think it makes sense to start in your own. I think in English you say garden or something. I don't know. Okay, whatever.
Well, my first.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay, but you know what I mean. I had a third thought. Of course, if other people do similar things, or other organizations do similar things, try to collaborate rather than seeing them as a competition, because I actually think that there's the goal is bigger than that.
Yes, definitely.
I couldn't have put it better than Alina and Helene. Just to add something, and maybe actually Helene already touched on it. There's probably going to be a trade-offs involved between different SDGs that you're trying to solve. Just to be aware of that, it doesn't have to be a total conflict, but probably some of your goals might interfere with some other sustainable development goals. And in terms of if your motivation is to solve one of the sustainable development goals, then you should dig deeper than just the shallow level of kind of weak sustainability. If you're just optimizing for efficiency. That, of course, in itself is not bad. But if your motivation is to dig a bit deeper, then I would try to look at the next level. As Helene said, think of the bigger picture, not only your direct effect of what you're trying to solve, but also the second and third order, your systemic effects, your societal effects, because that's ultimately what's going to come out. And in almost any technological development, there's going to be unintended consequences that you probably should have thought before you started. So that as a hopefully more people will try to move into that field, because it's also a great field to be in at the moment. But to do it properly, that would be my biggest wish.
Thank you. A lot of advice, a lot of input to process.
While processing, maybe it's also just one thing to point out: don't let yourself be discouraged from what you're working towards. There's always going to be naysayers. Some people say it's too complicated. Well, if no one's nobody
knows what they're doing when they start doing things, so I wouldn't be discouraged by that.
That's true. Yeah. The last question. Okay. And it's an open question to the audience as well, and to our dear guests. What's your 2030 vision for the world and the Sustainable Development Goals, considering current technological trends?
Utopian or dystopian scenario?
I mean, I would say the reality. I mean,
try to balance the two.
Maybe someone can say like the dystopian one. Someone can mention the utopian.
Yeah, maybe I'll start with my hope, because I just had to think of this year at Republica. I heard a talk by Meredith Whittaker, who is the director, I think, of Signal, the app, and she said, "Okay, I'm here. I'm leading a tech startup. I'm a woman, and it's also a nonprofit organization." And I would like to see more of that. So this would be my positive vision, that other business models than the current big tech companies that we're having at the moment will be there and also working. I think this would be my greatest wish, to actually change something. But I don't know. Do you want to continue?
Maybe just a fun fact to add in here is that I've been hearing the feedback that as soon as an organization or a project is purpose-driven, it actually raises the number of applications by women who want to be involved. So that's interesting. And every time I'm looking at, for example, AI ethics panels or talks or experts, I'm seeing a lot of women involved. So from my personal perspective, that's great to see.
Yeah, it's very hard to predict something, you know. I can't predict the future, but I think what we know is that the technology will not just go away. I think we will be more and more surrounded by technologies such as AI, and what I just hope is that we have a good regulatory basis for that. Yeah, maybe with that, I would give the word to Johannes.
Yeah, I also I see a bunch of scenarios where that gets rather dystopian, but in terms of hope, my big hope is that the sustainable transition is not going to be done without technology. I think that's also utopian. Only one example: when you think about the transition from a centralized carbon-based energy system to a decentralized renewable energy system, you're going to need digital technologies because you can't handle the complexity otherwise. So they can, and in many ways need to be part of the solution. And the big hope is that the technology industry and the entire industry, not just big tech, but as Helene said, also some other models, academia, small entrepreneurs, startups, they realize the responsibility that they have, and kind of try to steer the technology that they have that has so much potential in so many ways for sustainable development. And that would be ultimately a responsible development of technology. That's the big hope. that's what we are working towards, and I think Helene and Alina and many others are also working towards. So hopefully that will materialize.
Maybe to talk about the time frame, right? So we're talking about only 7 years from now, so it's not the time for really dreams of big utopias. But we mentioned earlier that there's different companies who have the different frameworks they're currently working with individually. So what we can definitely strive for is alignment in that area. It's something that I think a lot of organizations can really get involved in and drive forward. We're talking about hopes and utopian views, dystopian views. I'd like to point out some data. So there's, if you don't know Hans Rosling and his book Factfulness, or his TED Talk, which is also amazing, he really looked into the data on what progress we've made towards the SDGs. So it's already a few years old, but I think it's something that we can just strive to keep the trend, because he's showing with the data that I think one of the titles of the talk is why things are not as bad as you think, and he can show it with the data, and let's just continue the trend and work towards betterment.
Yes, and I just wanted to add one other aspect. We are at least here in Europe, facing some democracy is at threat in many countries, and the like right-wing populist parties are getting stronger, which is also connected with technologies. You have mentioned the spread of misinformation before, or fake news, and I think so to take one step back, in order to achieve all sustainable development goals, we really have to defend democracy in the first place at the moment, and then also try to work on technologies, but also regulate technologies in a way that don't lead to more destruction, because I think in like an autocratic state, it will be impossible to reach any of the SDGs from my point of view.
Thank you so much for this input. I think I cannot add any. Oh, okay, thank you. And it only takes us to imagine the future to make it a reality. So I'm really happy that we had this discussion today, that we finally did this, tried to bridge the gap between industry, academia, and an international organization. And stay tuned to more and more episodes. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.